Hello everybody, Jake Raby here, Flat 6 Innovations. I want to welcome you back to the second video in our series, A Focus on IMS Bearing Failure. Now in this particular video, we're going to go through the diagnostic process associated with determining both if we have an intermediate shaft bearing failure and if the prior diagnosis was correct, and to see how extensive the collateral damage may be. So in case you missed the first video in this series, let me bring you up to speed. This is a 2003 Porsche 996 Mark II equipped with the factory 3.6 liter M96 engine. This car featured a failure which was believed to be an intermediate shaft bearing failure at 29,000 miles. And now we're going to diagnose this engine to make sure that it truly did have an intermediate shaft bearing failure. Now, let's get started. So the first step of diagnosing this failure has actually already been done for us. Unfortunately, when they performed the oil drain at the dealership where it was diagnosed, they took away a lot of critical information or clues that we would normally use to determine the severity of the failure. So with that being said, we're going to have to start by removing the oil filter and inspecting it for debris. We're going to look for size, shape, color, and quantity of any contents we might find there. We're also going to pull the engine oil sump plate from the bottom of the engine. With that said, let's get started. You can see behind me, we've removed the engine's oil sump plate as well as the oil filter canister and the filter cartridge. Now, we call the sump plate the window to the soul of the engine, because with the sump plate removed, we can see all kinds of things that may give us some clues as to what may have happened to the engine, as well as the severity of that particular happening or occurrence. So now I'm going to grab the sump plate, I'm going to come up here, we're going to go over what we found in the oil that was remaining there, as well as we're going to cut the filter apart and see what we've got there. Okay, so first off, we're going to discuss what we find inside the cartridge canister, if you will, of the oil filter. Now the factory oil filter has this plastic housing, of course, which holds a lot of debris when you have a failure, and we have the factory filter cartridge. Now, if you use the Ellen Engineering spin-on oil filter adapter, that's going to look a little bit different. You're not going to have a cartridge like this that you can easily see. You're going to have better filtration, but you're going to have to cut a metal canister open to get to this point, okay? So I actually collected some more video while we were doing the job of removing these components of the actual canister itself. So let's take a break for a second. I want to show you that video. As I move the oil around, you can see how fluid the metal is in the oil. This is what gets basically suspended in the oil and driven throughout the entire engine, impacting every internally lubricated component within the engine. You can see some copper colored material, some silver, some dark flecks as well. If you look at the center of the photo, there's some really heavy copper, 2 dots there. Those are certainly from the main and rod bearings. That's how heavy that copper is. So this engine has seen some extensive collateral damage stemming from the intermediate shaft bearing failure. Again, I'm going to shake this up, and this is the reason why collateral damage with an intermediate shaft bearing failure is so much more important to the overall cost of the endeavor than the actual failure of the bearing. This is what creates secondary, tertiary collateral damages, and this is what ends up taking out the rest of the engine. You can see the intermediate shaft bearing failure has generated a tremendous amount of material that the filter also was able to catch. And this is concerning because the filter is packed so full of debris that I'm sure some of it has bypassed the filter. Just, it's got some debris here. You can see it's got some nice color to this. A lot of IMS bearing material here. A lot of main bearing material here. All the copper you see is from main and rod bearings within this engine. What we typically do here is these are oil absorbent mats, sometimes called a pig mat. It works really well because we can pour the contents that is remaining inside this filter canister onto the pig mat. The oil will pass through it and it will leave a field of the debris behind. It works really well when you're trying to really get a visual of exactly what you've got going on from a material perspective, okay? So we're just going to dump this out, kind of go along that pathway there, okay? And then, of course, we're going to have some debris remaining in the bottom of this canister. So here in a few minutes, we'll be able to see all the debris that was left behind from this particular filter canister, okay? What I've got here is a hawkbill knife. Works really well for cutting these filters apart. You just cut each end of the factory filter off, okay? You'll end up with a couple of discs that look a lot like that. You'll have the center section of the filter, and then you have the actual media, okay? Once you have the media, then I like to make another cut and then just pull it apart. So now you can see the huge debris field that we have all through this filter. And there's a lot of very small ferromagnetic debris here. This is just a tremendous amount. This is about normal from the perspective of an IMS bearing failure, both in size and shape. Also, the color and quantity of it tells me that we've already gone through all 4 stages of IMS bearing failure, which you can basically learn about in the videos that we did with PCA back in 2017. Tons of debris, tons of very small, very harmful debris that can get picked up in the oil and then shoved through a lot of other components while the engine is trying to operate. This owner did do the proper thing and he did shut the car off very early, and we can see that because there's no large debris here. Large debris tells us the severity and the collateral damage. So as you can see here on the pig mat, the absorbent mat, we also have a lot of matter that was picked up there that's also ferromagnetic that came out of the bottom of the filter housing, and there's still some left in the filter housing as well that you can see at the bottom there. Okay, so I would say that in this case, the diagnostics the dealer gave this particular engine of an IMS bearing failure are correct. So we will move on to the next stage. All right, so that's a little bit about the really basic ways of diagnosing IMS bearing failure. Pay attention to the size, shape, color, and quantity of this debris field. This is a classic example. I do believe the dealer got it right. Now, also want to show you the end of my little screwdriver here is magnetic, okay? And as I pass this over, I'm just ending up with a ton of ferromagnetic debris stuck on my magnet here, as you can see, okay? So all of this is magnetic. If it wasn't magnetic, I would start thinking I had another failure. Also, if some of it was magnetic and some of it wasn't, it may help me understand the extent of collateral damages, okay? Now, with this particular engine, this owner did do the right thing. When the engine failed, he did not continue trying to operate the vehicle. He kind of knew something was wrong, he ceased operation of it, and it wasn't ran anymore. Since he did that, there's a good possibility that we have avoided collateral damages like bent valves and other things. So now what you have to understand is we will be totally reconstructing this engine into a Flat 6 Innovations R40 Stage 2 street and track performer. That's an engine that can drive every day and also do HPDE events at the track. It will equally do both of those very well. There are no drawbacks from building the engine this way. It even maintains good gas mileage. So since the R40 process is so comprehensive, we don't care if the engine has bent valves. We don't care if the engine had bad pistons. We don't care if it's got a broken timing chain. We don't care about any of those things, because whether or not those components are good or bad, we are still going to be replacing them. So that's what makes this engine so much different than everything else, is we don't just replace what is necessary at this time. We replace what is known to be a weakness in the engine, and we do that every time. Whether the part is good today or not, we're still going to replace it. And that is what makes this program special. So in closing, what we've learned here, the dealer did properly diagnose this. At least we think that's the case at this time. Everything is pointing to it here. This does look like a classic IMS bearing failure. We did collect an oil sample just for the heck of it, because you never know if that could come in handy later on down the road. We start looking at other components that may have suffered some sort of a problem from this. So the used oil analysis will help us shed some light on that. At the same time, used oil analysis is fairly ineffective once you've got debris that you can visually see, because the micron count of that is great enough that it is not going to be detected by used oil analysis. Used oil analysis is only for those microscopic things that we can't see with the human eye. If we can see it, it probably is not going to detect it. That's not something that's super well known, but it's something we see a lot here. There's a good possibility the oil sample for this engine could come back normal, because all of this debris is too large to be detected. So thank you for viewing this RenVision technical video, the second part of the focus on IMS bearing failure that we're sharing with you here. Now again, we're going to reconstruct this engine into an R40 street and track performer. It will be a 4-liter engine. It will have much greater performance both in horsepower and torque. Not just peak power, but average power is going to be up everywhere over the stock 3.6 liter. We are going to end up creating this engine from the 3.6 liter that is currently still in the car. So that leads me into what will be our third video in this series, and that is going to be when we pull the engine out of the car and get ready to disassemble it for the reconstruction process. So make sure that you like and subscribe to our channel here on YouTube, and make sure you check out our weekly podcast, RenCast, which is available on Spotify and all the other podcasting platforms. So back in 1999, my very first technical video was shot. And that's the Volume 8 Bug Me video, where we actually built an engine that would be fitted into a Porsche 914 or an old Volkswagen bus. That's still available today. Way back then, things had not come nearly as far as they have today. Matter of fact, I remember when we first had the capability of putting those old Volume 8 videos onto a DVD. So today, 20 years later basically, we're sitting in a studio where we have been able to collect over 100 hours of raw footage that it takes to put together these engines. We were able to take 100 hours of our lives and devote to sharing all this information with you at home, be it a do-it-yourselfer or a professional alike. A few other facts about this educational video series, which is what this actually is a series of episodes that take you through what it takes to think about building an engine and then carry out the process from A to Z. Cleanliness, special tools, all of those things are covered. We take the question marks out of the toolbox. So that 100 hours of video was collected from no less than 6 different cameras at multiple camera angles. So we're not just sitting there sharing one camera angle with you. I believe in high attention to detail, and I believe in precision. Furthermore, I like to have surgical precision when it comes to building an engine. And that's what I'm sharing with you in the educational series to support the M9X engine. What makes this educational series so unique is the fact that this information is all derived from my head and my hands, and also from those who work under me here at Flat 6 Innovations. A lot of my technicians, my engine builders, have learned things about these engines over the years that I have not been exposed to. So this is a collaborative effort where I've taken the brain trust of every individual that I can possibly reach out to in our facilities as well as at LN Engineering, and it encompasses this entire video series that is truly educational. It is a way that we can tell you what you need to know in the simplest ways possible to have an experience with this engine that is going to be positive if you just follow our instructions. If you have the desire to understand what makes the M96 engine tick and all the things that we've learned about how to put these engines together that has not come from a workshop manual, then you need to purchase this particular educational video series. It's that hands-on, first-hand experience that I'm able to convey to you that makes the difference. No, I didn't sit there and read a workshop manual. Matter of fact, there's not one in this entire studio today. There hasn't been one here while we've been filming this. Everything has been resource material we have created from scratch and show you all the things you need to know to do this job successfully yourself.